So this morning it won't be specifically on literacy per se, but literacy is definitely one of our focuses, and we were really happy that the New Brunswick Coalition invited us. Literacy is a big challenge for New Brunswick and Atlantic Canada, and I think the takeaway that you should have from this morning is how do we get government, community groups, and academia to work together. That's the objective we have as a research network. And as I was going through the schedules and the presentations that I've gone to, I think you've covered a lot of the quantitative issues. You've looked at skills around literacy. I mean, the program is quite exceptional for this conference. So I'm a little reassured in the sense that we won't be digging very deep in the world of literacy per se or adult literacy, but I think that's sort of been covered in a lot of the presentations. I mean, and strategically, I think it's an interesting session. You've done stuff, or I've gone to stuff on accountability from funders, how do we work with new social media, how do we work with government. But the objective here, or what I'd like to share with you this morning, is how do you get academia, government, community groups to work together. So connecting researchers with policy developers to create evidence-informed public policy. Now, anybody of you who work with government, whether it be SSHRC, the federal funding from SSHRC or from national health institutes, or for your provincial governments, no doubt, you'll know that this has become a very important word, just like synergy was maybe 10 years ago, or one of those key elements where government is looking for a maximum bang of its buck. And for that, it's looking for a decision-making process that goes around evidence-informed public policy. What does that mean? It means that you've done research, you've asked the questions, you've had hypotheses, you have control groups. I mean, it's what academia does, and if you're able to build a partnership as a community group, and I've been in that world for about 20 years in French community groups in Atlantic Canada, and I know very well, for the last 10 years, I mean, 20 years ago, you'd write your subsidy form and you get your money, and there's not much in terms of accountability. We're no longer in that world. So even strategically, if you're not even thinking about building knowledge, which is maybe what academia is looking for, if you're looking for getting funding and being able to share, obviously, the results of your projects, etc., this has become very important. So what we're trying to do in New Brunswick, trying to bring those three groups together and help out the three groups. Who are we? Well, essentially, the network is a partnership between our four universities. There's Mount Allison University, University of New Brunswick, St. Thomas University, and Université de Moncton. So just that is a big challenge. If I take it to the scale of Ontario, I mean, imagine trying to link up all universities. That might be too ambitious. If I take it to the scale of even Nova Scotia or BC, that's tough. So in a way, I think we might be advantaged in New Brunswick because of our scale, that we can maybe have that community work a little together. But I mean, honestly, I don't know if there's anybody here from the universities, it took 2 years. It took us 2 years to convince those four universities that there was added value to come to our table of our research policy network. So it's, be patient. If this is a model that you're interested in, it's going to take a little bit of time. Obviously, we have a language challenge also in New Brunswick. One of those three universities is French. So it's an opportunity. I said challenge, but it can be an opportunity also. But it does mean that we need to understand that this group needs to function in both official languages. And at the end of the presentation, I'll show you one of the tools that we have. Is a really interesting database where community, researchers, and government can log in and show what their needs are, what their aspirations are, what their projects are. And it's a first step to creating those links. So our network, New Brunswick Social Policy Research Network, was created in an effort to transform public policy making. Again, it didn't start yesterday. We all know that other key words, if you work with government, is horizontal collaboration between departments, breaking the silos, another key word that you've heard often. This sort of fits into that, and again, that's one of the walls that we're going to hit, is that departments are going to have turf wars, protecting their turf. They're going to be hesitant to collaborate. So if we bring them to the table with academia and community groups, we have a better chance of creating that vision of non-turf wars or not having a silo mentality. But obviously that's not easy. That's been an issue in government for, as I teach political science, 20, 30 years, whether it be Francophone or Aboriginal rights or environmental issues, trying to bring departments across the board to reflect on, good morning, on those issues horizontally is not an easy task. So that's who we are. Essentially, I don't think I put a slide of who are a very small administration. I'm deputy director. There's an executive director, Andy Scott, who's at UNB. We're a team of about 4 right now. And government has been really nice to us. They've seconded some civil servants. So we have 2 civil servants that have been seconded to us. So we're really happy about that. They bring a lot of experience. Bridging the gap, also a key element if you're analyzing why something is not happening sur le terrain, on the turf in your community. One of the things that we've seen, and this is one of the key elements to convince government, if you are to walk down this route of bringing academia, community groups, and government together, one of the key elements, and government will recognize it quite quickly, is their capacity in-house has diminished enormously. This is no longer the 60s, where we had royal commissions on a lot of things, where Treasury Board, Finance Department, Privy Council, I'm talking Ottawa here, had hundreds of people working on policy. Their job when they walk in the morning in the L'Angevin building or in the federal offices, big picture. How do we develop policy? How do we think globally about issues? Still a few lucky candidates out there who are paid to think globally. Essentially our governments, and I'll come back to New Brunswick or Atlantic Canada, and especially at our micro level where our civil service is even smaller, governments is essentially doing transactions all the time. They're responding to crisis, you know this obviously. And when you're in a transaction mode, your capacity to think about public policy is diminished. And that didn't take a long time for them to recognize that, I think. They've seen the central agencies in particular, like the Privy Council in Ottawa, in New Brunswick, it's the Conseil Exécutif, the Executive Council. The glory days of Louis Ramchaud, Richard Hatfield, which were premiers in the 60s and 70s, had teams of 80 civil servants in New Brunswick working on public policy, paid to think. Not about what food cafeterias can serve or absenteeism in school, not micro policies, not little transaction policies, thinking about how do we as a government, big picture, help develop literacy skills, etc. So this was a very convincing argument that we gave to government, and they recognized it. I was at a meeting that I'll never forget, where I'm in the cabinet room of where the New Brunswick government governs, and we have about 25 executive directors of policy in all the departments. So there's full potential silo war, full potential for turf war, and actually quickly the conversation came to, yeah, your network is going to be extremely useful to us because we no longer have staff, we no longer have the capacity to think. We got to go see what our universities are doing, and quite honestly, not that governments need to be perfect, but even within government, what we realize is that even within departments, people weren't sure what was being done in another branch of their own department in terms of research, in terms of knowledge. So again, bringing those people to the same table has major benefits, and that was their key argument for government. So our mandate at the network's quite simple. Occasions for collaboration, people conducting research, and our definition of social policy is very wide. It includes fisheries, forestry. It includes, obviously, socioeconomic issues, language, education, literacy. Obviously, those are really key elements for the development of New Brunswick and Atlantic Canada. And connect the people within academia to find questions that could be useful for applied research, obviously. So again, it's just bringing these people together. To convince academia, what did they tell us off the bat? What do you think they told us? Academic freedom. La liberté académique. What? You're going to have us work on government issues? We're not here to help government. We're here to faire avancer la science. We're here to bring knowledge forward, to build knowledge, right? So you got to break that first wall and saying, look, we're not asking you to throw away academic freedom. We're asking you to maybe consider some issues on literacy, on education in New Brunswick, and you could be helping society as a whole. Are you interested? And it's not for everybody. I think the other little parenthesis I'll do here is some researchers honestly don't need us. They're scholars that are publishing in international university press, and for them to come to Gino Leblanc for help on a research question is quite ridiculous. So we understand that within academia there are different types of researchers, different levels of researchers, and I think you have to be knowledgeable of that. But still, if we could bring researchers, professors within universities to ask questions that may be part of your research project, one of your case studies could be one that is relevant to a question government has also. These people honestly don't really talk much to each other. So, government, when we see government, I told you we really convinced them on the idea of their diminishing capacity in-house, and hey, we're bringing resources free. You know, you're already paying these university professors. Maybe they can help you with questions. Good morning. One of the other convincing elements that we had for them is that as an academic, you need resources. You need money. Sure, you need shirt money. You need funding from your provincial government. You need resources. And it's been very clear. The first day we started this, Andy Scott and a group of us went to see Shirk right away. And Mark Renault was the president then. Chad Gatfield is now the president. And for them it was clear, yeah. One of their key elements, the first slide was evidence-based policy, that sort of buzzword. The other key element for them is impact and relevancy. We're going to fund stuff, especially in these, with this government here. I try not to be political this morning, but it's very clear that SSHRC needs to show relevance to the federal cabinet. We're giving money for social science and humanities research. They want the keywords, the buzzwords are impact and relevance. So when you go to a professor, a researcher in a university and tell them, look, if you can bring, they call them les décideurs, the deciders, I don't know if that's the proper translation, les décideurs, the people that make decisions that will affect impact and relevancy. We're willing to bring government officials to your project, and you can, on your ask sheet or your proposal for financing, you can say that the deciders, government civil servants, are part of your team, and that brings you up in the scoring right away, so you can score more points. So, you know, for Chad Gatfield, who was in New Brunswick just 2 weeks ago, he sees this network as some major added value. So, you know, again, we're scoring good points and making people a little happier. I haven't spoken much about community groups, which is ironic, and I'll stop right there because I'm really from that world initially. I'm not within an academic world, but for community groups, it's just plain limited resources. I mean, how many community groups have a full-time researcher? In New Brunswick, I would imagine maybe the teachers union, which is that a community group is more of a union. Not much. Part-time, some projects, in and out projects with academics that are willing to take time and students to a project. So for them, it's just capacity. It's being able to also be in the world of evidence-based, should I say lobbying, but evidence-based tools to convince government that these decisions will help certain issues, whether it be literacy or poverty, etc. So operations, it's quite simple. We're really a network. We're not going to do research. I think that's important to tell you this morning. The network does not do research, although sometimes I would really enjoy that. I have to pull back and say we're really just pulling people together. We're trying to coordinate public policy development, coordinate what community is doing out there. So it's really putting people together. And in preparing for my presentation today, I went to what the Fédération d'Alphabétisation du Nouveau-Brunswick has done in the last 4 or 5 years. And if I go back to a forum they had a few years ago, I mean, for them, convincing governments to do all the things that I've mentioned earlier, convincing universities to do more research are all priorities for them. We need to build capacity, and we need to make better decisions in public policy making. Obviously, there's also